What up, Marsh Pod? We are back in the saddle, fully rolling now. Appreciate the opportunity again to be able to step aside. We are going to do some actual full-out travel logs, but to be honest with you, the travel itself was tiring enough to then try to put together some individual videos. Longer form was a little harder. We'll probably do more city as opposed to day-to-day for those. But if you do want any type of content in general, there is some reels over on the old Instagram. So selfless plug. Marshall Hastings on IG has a lot of great content, but we'll be getting some travel logs going here to provide some information on everything. It was a great trip. We'll dive into that, but happy to be back, happy to get rolling, and happy to jump in because I got a couple SimWorld U things to chat about today. First is Louisville, and second is the top 10, and they kind of go hand in hand with one another. So let's start with Louisville, who since being a top 10 team has gone 0-3 since they took down Kentucky in that rivalry game. Their losses, two of them to now top 10 teams as we record this on Sunday after the SP Top 25 has come out. Iowa and Butler, and their losses have come by 3, 2, and 11 points. So what does it mean? I don't totally know. They don't strike me as a team that's in the top 10 bona fide. That I do know. They also don't strike me as a team that's in the bottom of the top 25. Which they are not. I think they're sitting, I take that back. I think they're sitting like 20-something, which to me feels a little bit low considering how close their losses have been against very good teams. But they, despite being 5-5, don't strike me as a team in the bottom of the top 25, which a lot of those teams there, which we're going to get to, are barely sitting around 500. Tweeted about the win-loss gap last week in the top 25, or the top 10 versus everybody else. Louisville, to me, is smack dab in the middle of the everyone else. Maybe higher, the cream rises to the top, and they're right at the bubble at being at the top of that kind of everybody else category. I still like their offense, 13th in the country. They're among the elite in all three of the shooting percentage markings, but their defense is really what holds them down. It's 67th. Where I see this team is I struggle to see them as a pathway for an ACC championship because the teams that are ranked above them, at least guaranteed 3 of the 4, if not all 4 of them, I think are better. Duke, Georgia Tech, Virginia Tech, and North Carolina. Duke has the 6th and the 9th best offense and defense, respectively, in the league. Georgia Tech is 15th and 33rd. UNC is 37th and 18th. All of those are better, obviously, on both ends, substantially from Louisville. The team that maybe they can match up with is Virginia Tech, who's 8th in offense, is 5 spots ahead of them, and 69th, nice, in defense, obviously, 2 spots behind them. But that's where Louisville sits. I don't see them as a team that's going to be in the bottom of the ACC, but they also really aren't one of the top 3 teams, maybe not even the top 4 teams in the conference itself. The bottom of the ACC is bad. So it seems likely that they should be able to rack up some wins against the Syracuses, the Florida States, the Wake Forests of the conference. The sky isn't falling. It's pretty likely that this team is going to end up or continue to be in the top 25 or contending to just be on the other side of it. They lose another game here, they fall to 5-6, they're not going to be a top 25 team. But I also don't think they're going to be outside of the top 64. And that obviously is what's going to matter for this team to get into hoops area come the end of the season. This team hasn't been a top 5 team. They're just outside of that. But they should be a team that we still believe in. So, what's the whole point of this? The point of this is it goes into a larger view of the top 25, and in particular the top 10, the inconsistency of it, but also the inconsistency of the top 25 in general. So, tweeted about that earlier today, that Butler, that the top 10 went 10-1. Everybody else went combined 7-10, with 2 of those wins coming from UNC. With Butler's inclusion in the top 10, it's now 11-1 for the top 10 teams last week. 6-10 still, obviously 2 of those wins coming from UNC. So you remove UNC from that equation, and it is a 4-10 week last week for everybody ranked for teams that were last week ranked in the top 25. That is a continuation of what has been a chaotic season. We have 22 teams that have been at any point ranked in the top 10, with Butler being the latest. That's stabilized. Since November 23rd, the top 8 has literally gone unchanged, and I think that's for good reason. The top 28 or the top 8 has looked like the top 8. The line in the sand right now to me between the good group and the bad group, or the mediocre group, if you will, is about 14. And earlier in the season, I thought it might have been as low as 5. That's not the case. It is expanded to be about 14, but I will hear an argument if you want to cut that down to even 12, maybe 10. Anyhow, the top 14 teams through this season are 131-37. That's a 77.8% winning percentage. If you go to the top 10, that's 97-26, with 10 losses coming from Arkansas and Kansas combined. That's a 78.9 win percentage. The combined record of 15 through 25 ranked teams is 61-36, a 62.9 winning percentage. That is a 15-point difference between our top 14 teams and the rest of the top 25. Princeton and San Diego State are the only two teams in the bottom 10 of this ranking that are more than 3 games over 500. On average, the 15 through 25 ranked teams are 1.9 games above 500. If we take out San Diego State and Princeton, they are 1.2 games over 500. The numbers that are good for the top 10 or the top 4 teams are really getting weighed down by Indiana, who's won 6 straight and has 6-3. UConn, who obviously has been to back-to-back national championship games at 6-4, and aforementioned UNC, who's now 7-4. They are kind of on the cusp of being in both brackets. I'm putting them in the top right now. Larger sample size will determine if that's the right spot. Maybe you can make the case for San Diego State and Princeton to join that group, and that extends our actual contenders list to a very convenient 16. This isn't a pitch, though, for someone else to be in the top 25, because who would you add? UCLA, Tennessee, New Mexico, and Kansas State all got knocked out. They have a combined record of 23-22. Who else would you add? Maryland, who was a top 10 team. They're currently 3-1. Probably should be in the top 25, but they're 3-1. Michigan State, who's 3-1, Villanova at 3-8, Dayton at 7-8, Creighton at 5-6. Once you get outside of the top 14, everything becomes muddied. Everything becomes inconvenient. Everything becomes inconsistent. My point. Last season, we saw an absolute lack of upsets in Hoopsteria. Only 2 lower seeds advanced out of the first round of the national tournament. The Sweet 16 featured 14 top 4 or better seeds. So 14 of our 16 teams were ranked 4th or better. Elite 8 was 7 of the top 8 teams, Alabama being the 8th, and they were a top 10 team all season. We didn't see any upsets. We saw all of the top teams advance. We saw all of the top teams mow through the competition, and we saw a very chalk national tournament. What that made was for better basketball in the Elite 8, the Final Four, and the national championship game. What it didn't make for great basketball and great entertainment was the first weekend. Depends on what you value. I would rather see the better teams advancing towards the end of the season, because what I don't want to see is Duke go out early on to a team and then we get, not to say the team couldn't beat Duke, but Duke not being in the Final Four would be disappointing. Top 5 is looking pretty good. Means that one of those teams is not going to make it there. But Duke has been, as we could see, a top 10 offense and defense. Maybe the best team, not maybe, the best team in the country thus far this season. It feels as if we're trending in that direction. It depends on the user. It depends on the viewer. If you think that's better or not. Personally, give me the good teams at the end. Save the upsets, because really all it does is take out a good team that's got a legitimate chance of winning a national championship. They just have one bad game. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with the greats advancing and the best teams being there at the end.